Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. And today we're going to be taking a look at the jcwings July release announcements, which came out just a couple of days ago. And there looks like quite a varied and interesting batch of models here from JC this month. Also a decent number. There are 17 models in total, though there are actually only 14 which are completely unique, because 3 have the flaps down versions of flaps up. So 14 models that we'll look through in this video. One of the things that jcwings really has going for it is this really impressive mold catalogue. It's got a lot of different molds available, partly because it's got the combination of its molds and Gemini's old molds, and that gives it a really impressive range of types of aircraft. So that's really cool, and you can see that this month where there's a lot of variety. Also, another thing which is good to see is that jcwings is continuing its recent trend of actually releasing some of the models near the announcement date, which is something it's not been great at historically. So nearly half of the models that have been announced now are visible, i.e. you've actually got pictures of the models available. They may not be quite at the stores yet, but they're close, and that's something which it wasn't doing a little while ago. So that's good to see that at least some of the models will be out in the near term. And those are the ones that I will start with first in this video ranking review. Before I get to that, obviously, check out yesterday's Airlines if you haven't already. Like and subscribe to the video. And keep an eye out on my other channels at Instagram, Facebook, and at 400 Scale and Detail on Facebook as well. But now, without further ado, let's get in and have a look around these jcwings releases. Okay, as I said, I'm going to start with the models which actually have photos of the actual models available for them. And we'll begin with the Asiana Airlines A321 HL8071, which is in the Star Alliance livery. And this is not the first time that jcwings has released an A321 of Asiana in a Star Alliance scheme. Quite often, something you'll see with JC releases is that they release a variant of the airline aircraft combination, and then a few months or a few years, even sometimes later, you get another version of it coming out, which is similar but not exactly the same. And in this case, the difference between this model and the version which they released quite a long time ago now in 2018 is that the 2018 version was an A321 which had the wingtip fences on it, and it also had the older style 15th anniversary sticker behind the Star Alliance titles, but otherwise it's going to be broadly the same. Except this one, lacks that sticker and has the sharklets. So what do I think of the model? Well, jcwings A321 is okay. It's not great. It's at least got the right wing on it, unlike quite a few other manufacturers, Phoenix and Aero Classics especially, who don't have the correct wing for an A321 with sharklets. So that's good. It doesn't really hold up especially well in comparison to the A321 molds from Pandora, HY Wings or ngmodels, but it's not disastrous by any means. It's okay, at least in the CEO versions where the engines are okay sized. So for me, this is going to be a middling model. It's not great. It's not going to be bad either. If you like Asiana, obviously you're going to be buying it, but I think that for me, this is just going to be sitting up there in workhorse territory. This has got that kind of classic workhorse feel to me. Next up is Turkish Airlines, an airline which has seen explosive growth over the last 15-20 years, and this aircraft illustrates that, I guess. It's an Airbus A330 TC LNC, and it's got this 300th aircraft logo on it. Turkish has actually got quite a nice scheme, I always think. It's simple, and the sort of scheme that in other airlines I might go, oh, that's a bit boring, but then you've got this wonderful silver tulip on the rear of the fuselage, which I really like. And actually, adding this quite large 300th aircraft sticker to the front actually kind of makes the scheme a lot more interesting. So now you've got something interesting going on at the front of the plane and at the rear of the fuselage and on the tail. So it actually makes the scheme better, I think. So I'm actually quite liking this special scheme. In terms of the JC A330, it's not the best A330 on the market, much like the A321, but it's not disastrous. Again, it's a perfectly decent A330, though obviously if you had a choice, I would probably buy most of the others on the market over it. I prefer the Phoenix version, I prefer the ngmodels version, I prefer the Panda version. But it is, I think, probably as good or on par with the Aviation 400 version, and it's a perfectly nice model, one that I wouldn't have a problem buying for my own collection. And actually, you know, I'm quite liking this livery combination with it. So for me, this one is doing better than perhaps it might do if it was a standard Turkish livery. Looking back over what's been made for Turkish on the A330-300, this is the 6th model, and there is an Aero Classics version floating around, plus I've had the 2 Aero Classics versions floating around, and a Phoenix version as well. So it's been a while, I think, since any more have been released, and this special scheme is unusual, hasn't been released before. JC also made a Turkish football club scheme. Again, it fits JC's method of producing 2 similar-ish variants. That was released last year. Yeah, I quite like it, actually. I'm surprised I like it so much. I'm going to give this one a high flyer. Next up is Singapore Airlines 777-300. You could perhaps think that there's nothing more bread and butter than Singapore Airlines for a brand like jcwings, but actually when I look back through the release history of 777-300s in 400 scale for Singapore, there aren't actually as many as I thought there might be. Or at least there aren't that many that have been made recently. Let's put it that way. At least there are actually 28 models altogether. But when you look through, quite a lot of them are in different schemes and or on older molds. And jcwings did make a Singapore 777 in this livery, but it was way back in 2009 on their old mold, before they had aerials and before they had really the sort of detailing they've got now. So it's probably overdue for a re-release. It's interesting that Aviation 400 have made this model in 2020, so that is probably its most close comparison. Phoenix actually also did it in the same year. In fact, looking at it, sorry, it was 2021 for the Aviation 400 and 2020 for the Phoenix. So there are versions of it knocking around. However, personally, I really like the jcwings 777 mold. I think it's probably the best on the market, and they've got great detail in their printing. These models look like they're going to be good, and there's also a flaps down variety available as well. Yeah, I would seriously consider getting this model. I actually really like it. Again, I'm surprised I like it as much, but looking at the finished article, it looks really crisp, really nice. I'm going to give this one supersonic, I think. Next up is a rather obscure airline, which most people probably aren't really aware of, China Air Cargo. It's, as its name suggests, a Chinese cargo airline. And it's got a kind of okay, middling kind of livery. It doesn't really shout at me. It's kind of red and white. It's not great, but it's not a dreadful livery either. It kind of looks like 2 liveries put together, because the tail and rear fuselage don't seem to really match with the kind of sheet line striping. But yeah, it's okay. It actually isn't the first time that it's been made in 400 scale. HYJ Airwings actually made a version of this quite a few years ago on the ngmodels mold back in 2018, and actually I own that model myself. It's really nice because it's on the ng mold, and even though JC has updated their 757, the mold still is substantially inferior to the ng version. So you might, in a direct comparison, the HYJ Airwings version is going to be better. Having said that, there are only 100 of those made, so it's a really tiny production run. But that doesn't really matter too much. I think most of the people watching this video, I can't believe, are going to be getting too excited about this model. And if you were a real Chinese fanatic airline collector, you probably have the HYJL version. So considering the airline and the mold combination, I think this one is just going to be a workhorse. Next up, we wander back to Europe, and we've got a Polish 737 MAX 8. This has been released in 400 scale previously, both by Aero Classics and Phoenix, but those are my two least favourite 737 MAX 8 moulds. So I am super pleased to see that jcwings are producing this, because at present time, jcwings have got the best available MAX mould, in my opinion. Panda had a good mould, but they don't seem to have access to it anymore. So this one, I think, is going to really rock. The only problem is, obviously, that most people probably have a version of the Phoenix or the Aero Classics versions, which came out a few years ago. But this one is clearly going to be better than those, not just in terms of the mould, but also in terms of the printing detail. And looking at the picture, it looks really nice. So, is it enough reason to sell your old version? That's entirely up to you. I wouldn't have bought the other two based off of the quality of the moulds personally, but this looks like it's going to be a really nice model, and it's easily up there in high flight territory. Okay, the last model, which has an actual picture available at this point in time, is a Thai Airways ATR42 HSTRL, which has got the special 200th logo on it, and I assume that means it's the 200th ATR or something like that. It can't be 200 ATR. I'm not sure what it means, to be honest. Surely there were more than 200 ATRs at that point in time. But that doesn't really matter too much. It looks really nice. The pictures look good, and I've got to say that I'm a big fan of the JC Gemini ATR42 mould. Looks really cool. It's not the first time that jcwings have made a Thai Airways ATR42. They made one quite a long time ago. It didn't have the 200th logo on it. But I imagine that's not a particularly common release that many people have. It looks really nice. Thai Airways has got really good coverage in the last couple of years from jcwings, and clearly it's an area that they're keen on, and they've produced some really nice models for Thai. And let's face it, this is a lovely old scheme, a classic old livery, which actually the replacement scheme was nice too, but this one, I think, it's got that real classic feel to it. It's really good, so can't argue about that. It's going to be another really nice model, and again, I think this one is sitting up there in high flight territory for myself. Okay, so those are the models which have got actual photos available for. The rest of them do not. That doesn't really matter too much. The molds are fairly well known, and so we'll walk through the rest of them in the same way, starting with a Boeing company 737-300 in this USL hybrid colours. I think this was used at Farnborough in 1984. It's actually a model which has been made by Aero Classics using the Panda mould quite a few years ago now, back in 2013, in fact. Wow, that's not a long time ago, longer than I thought. And the original was quite nice. This one's obviously going to come with aerials, but it's actually coming with an older mould, because it's on the old Gemini 737-300 model, which is fine as long as their printing's okay, but it's not great. It's interesting that JC have been producing quite a wide range of classic 737-300s recently. Using this mold, they've made American Airlines, for example, and I guess that's nice to see. It'll be nicer on a really nice new mold, but this isn't a dreadful mold. It's perfectly reasonable. So I don't know, it's not thrilling me. Again, I actually don't have the old Aero Classics version. I don't think I'll be getting this one either, but it's perfectly nice, and it'll be okay. It's not going to break any records for quality or niceness in terms of the mould. So I'd say, for me, this is again a workhorse. Next up is quite an unusual livery. This is a hybrid. It's a KLM Cityhopper Fokker 70 in a Silk Air hybrid scheme. Not a particularly attractive hybrid, I have to say. It's just got the KLM titles, and they've kind of wiped out most of the tail logo that was Silk Air. jcwings made a Silk Air Fokker 70 just recently, so it's not at all surprising that they've got this version coming out as well. As I say, they tend to like to make multiple versions at the same time. I imagine that both models were made together, and then they just dribble them out onto the market. There's nothing wrong with that, I guess. This one is not particularly exciting for me, but if you're a KLM collector, then maybe you would disagree and think it was really cool. So it's entirely kind of up to, again, you, whether you think that is something which makes it better, or as a general release. For me, the mould is great as long as the wheels are reasonably sized. It's good to set some Fokker 70s. This is only the 10th one that's ever been made in 400 scale, but the livery is pretty tedious. And I'd have preferred the Silk Air one before, which I actually didn't realise they'd released. So again, for me, this one is just going to be a workhorse model. Next up is an A340-500. This one's in the colours of the Italian Air Force, and JC have shown some interest in Air Force versions of the A350 over the last 4 or 5 years. They've previously released a Thai Air Force version and a Turkish Air Force version. Both have been quite nice, but nothing special, and that's mainly because the jcwings A350 mould is an old cradle mount mould. It's certainly inferior to the Phoenix mould by some distance. That doesn't necessarily mean that I wouldn't buy it, but it's definitely not as good. Phoenix obviously haven't made the Italian Air Force, and it's probably not one they're likely to make anytime soon. So in that scenario, you kind of, if you want it, you've only got this version to buy. I think it'll be nice. The scheme's quite attractive. It's quite a classy scheme, as I guess you'd expect from the Italians. And just like the previous Turkish government version, I think it'll probably turn out quite nicely. But you've got to bear in mind the seam and the mould isn't quite up to the same standard as on the Phoenix. So again, for me, it's not quite making high flyer because of the mould, but it's nice to see a diverse model, and it's up there quite comfortably into the workhorse space. Next model up is an Icelandair 737-400. Now, I guess I could make all the same criticisms of the mould that I made for the 300. They're from the same era. It's got the same features, it's just longer. But this is Icelandair in the classic 90s scheme. They'd previously made Icelandair 737-400, and it was in the newer scheme, which for me wasn't the scheme that really fits the type in Icelandair colours. This one is one I'm really interested in, and maybe this just shows my bias for that era, but it's a visitor to Heathrow, and it's a nice livery, classic livery, which will go super well with the NG 757 that has been released in the same scheme. So I'm really excited by this one. I think this one's going to be really nice. I guess this, technically is probably no better than the US Air Hybrid that I talked about earlier on, but for me, for personal reasons, this one's much better, and I think it'll be really nice. I hope it will anyway. I hope they get the cockpit in the right place and all that. So for me, this one is a supersonic. I understand other people might not see it that way, but hey, my video. Okay, we just got 4 more releases to look into here. And the next one up is an airline I didn't even realise existed until I looked at this. And that's always nice, actually, when manufacturers produce airlines which are more unusual. And the airline here is called Skyup, which is quite a new Ukrainian charter airline by the look of things. But this actually isn't in their standard scheme. This is in, or actually it's not even technically Skyup. It's Smartwings in this kind of Skyup hybrid, which is a bit weird, and perhaps makes me think that they're going to be making a pure Skyup version at some point in the future. As I say, you can never quite tell with JC, but the box might give it away because the boxes often have multiple versions of the model on and they reuse them. So the livery is not that exciting. To be honest, Skyup scheme isn't particularly great either, but with Smartwings on it, it kind of just makes it even less so. It would probably be a workhorse for me, except that this mould is looking incredibly dated nowadays when you've got the NG and Panda versions out there. I really would like JC to update their 737-800 mould. 4 or 5 years ago, it was probably okay, but now I tend to avoid it, and the ones that I have in my collection, I look at them and go, yeah, this is not looking great. The biggest issues are probably around the nose and the nose gear. The tyre's too big. The nose gear doors are too big and kind of clunky. The nose is a bit pointy. It just doesn't really work as a 737-800 in 2022, I don't think, and certainly in comparison to those competing moulds. it's not doing it for me. So it's not that exciting from a delivery perspective, even though the airline's new and the mold isn't particularly good. So this is the first one I think which I'm going to put in gas guzzler. But it's not the last one, because next up is a Spring Airlines A320 Neo. I really like Chinese airliners, and I want to collect this model, but I just can't be bringing myself to do it. I do have a single jcwings A320 Neo, but the engines are just enormous. The mold itself is still pretty ordinary, though they have improved it. It definitely looks better, and I've got a few of their CEOs, and I think they actually are not too bad. But the Neo engines are just vast, and attached to a mold which isn't itself perfect, it just produces kind of this unpleasant combination. It's a real shame because, like I say, I really want to buy it. Nobody else has made a Spring Neo apart from jcwings, so this is their second. The other one had a special scheme on it, their 100th aircraft scheme. And I looked at the model and I thought, it just doesn't look good. You know, not just the engines actually. On that version, the nose gear also looks a bit weird. Can't do it. I just can't bring myself to buy it, which is a real shame because it's a model I would buy. It's a gas guzzler. 2 left, and we've got next Scoot 787 9V OJJ, and this one's wearing a really funky Pokemon-inspired scheme. So how much you like this, I guess, depends on whether you like the Scoot livery to begin with and collect Scoot, and how much you like Pokemon. I mean, I've complained about Knock Scoot in the past. I guess Scoot is only half as bad. The name is rubbish, and I think in America it means something to do with dogs wiping their backsides along the ground. So it's a funny name anyway. It doesn't really travel well. The livery is pretty tedious, but actually the standard Scoot scheme looks better probably than this one in the sense like at least it's got something going on the forward fuselage. jcwings seem to love Scoot. I'm looking through the list of Scoot releases, and there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of 15 models that have been made for Scoot have been released by JC, and you won't be surprised to hear that all the other ones have been made by Phoenix. So, yeah, it's a great mold. I've talked about the mold before. I'm not going to carry on about it. jcwings 787 is great. The livery actually isn't dreadful if you like Pokemon. It's incredibly colourful, and you've got a lot of Pokemon on the side of it. So I'm sure there's a really strong market for it. It's not a model that I'm likely to be getting, so I'm going to put this in the workhorse because I don't like Pokemon that much, and Scoot isn't an airline that particularly thrills me, but it's sure it will turn out really nicely, and if you're a big fan of Pikachu and such, you know, you'll be out there buying it, I'm certain. Okay, last up. Drum roll for another Singapore Airlines 777, but this time it's a freighter, 9VDH, and this aircraft has, I believe, just been painted up in these colours, and it's a little disappointing that they are in these colours because it's a combination with DHL, and the DHL base scheme is just really, really boring. So it just doesn't excite whatsoever, which is a real shame, because when you look at it you go, oh, it's just got this gigantic empty yellow tail. At least they've put the DHL logo in the tail this time, because some aircraft haven't had that. But you've got Singapore Airlines titles at the front, classy with a crisp bird, and then you've got this bland back end to it. It doesn't excite me at all. But, you know, given their due, it's going to be a perfectly good model because the mould is really nice. As I've said before, the 777 for JC is excellent. So, you know, boring airline combination with an ugly livery, but a great mould. Screaming workhorse from where I'm standing, so it's off there into the workhorse category. Okay, so that's what I think of this month's releases. As always, guys, you know, if you've got different opinions, which I'm sure you do, chuck them in the comments and let's hear which models are most exciting you. If you don't agree with my discussion about the molds, then again, chuck a comment in. Always happy to hear what people think. It's another interesting month from jcwings. There's certainly some interesting airlines here, like that Skyup 737 and the Italian Air Force, and even that Silk Air hybrid Fokker 70. But for me, the core releases are or the best releases are, you know, good molds with strong classic liveries on Icelandair, Singapore Airlines, Thai Airways, and they're my top models for the month, along with the Lot Max and the Turkish A330. So that's what I think. It'll be interesting to see how the ones turn out which didn't have photos of the actual models assigned to them. But until next time, that's it from me at Yesterday's Airlines. See you later.